There are some faces from the 1980s that never really fade away, faces that feel woven into your own memories. They remind you of warm summer nights at the movies, of Friday evenings spent lost in stories that somehow stayed with you for decades. One of those unforgettable faces belongs to Elisabeth Shue. And yet, at some point, she seemed to quietly step away from the spotlight, leaving many to wonder, where did she go, and what really happened to her? And before the fame, before Hollywood truly knew her name, she was just a determined young girl finding her way. Elisabeth Judson Shue was born on October 6, 1963, in Wilmington, Delaware, and raised in South Orange, New Jersey. Growing up as the only girl among 4 siblings, she didn't shy away from competition. In fact, she embraced it. Alongside her brothers William, Andrew, and John, she developed a fierce athletic spirit early on. As she wasn't just driven, she was relentless. Whether it was playing soccer, excelling in gymnastics, or pushing her limits at Columbia High School in Maplewood, New Jersey, Elisabeth was already showing signs of the determination that would later define her career. But what makes her story truly compelling isn't just where she started. It's how she slowly, quietly carved her path into an industry that rarely gives second chances, and why, after rising so high, she chose to step back when no one expected it. At just 9 years old, Elisabeth Shue faced a turning point that would quietly shape the person she would become: her parents' divorce. Like many children navigating that kind of change, she didn't slow down, she sped up. She poured herself into movement, into goals, into anything that kept her pushing forward. Surrounded by her brothers, especially the older ones she admired, she found both strength and identity in that bond. It was a connection that would later carry her through some of life's highest highs, and its most painful moments. Long before Hollywood, sports were her world. Soccer fields, neighborhood games, constant competition. She wasn't just keeping up with her brothers, she was matching them stride for stride. By the time she reached Columbia High School in Maplewood, New Jersey, gymnastics had taken center stage. And she wasn't just participating, she was excelling, aiming for the state finals with a level of discipline that set her apart. Training, repetition, resilience. She learned early that success wasn't given, it was earned. That mindset would follow her everywhere. But because what she didn't know yet was that acting would demand that same relentless commitment. After graduating in 1981, she stepped into a completely different world at Wellesley College, one of the most prestigious all-women's institutions in the country. But behind the academic prestige was a simple reality: tuition, expenses, responsibility. And it was there, in the middle of balancing it all, that something unexpected entered her life. Not a grand opportunity, not a carefully planned decision, but a chance encounter with television commercials, an opportunity that would quietly open the first door to everything that followed. What began as a simple way to pay the bills quickly turned into something far more significant for Elisabeth Shue. She started appearing in commercials for major brands like Burger King, De Beers Diamonds, and Hellmann's Mayonnaise, faces you'd see on television without thinking twice, yet somehow never forget. At the time, it was practical, just a means to an end. But quietly, without any grand plan, it was laying the foundation for a much bigger future. By 1985, her path seemed to be heading somewhere entirely different. She transferred to Harvard University to study political science, stepping into one of the most demanding academic environments in the country. But life rarely follows a straight line. As her studies intensified, so did the opportunities in front of the camera. And eventually, she reached a crossroads, one that would define everything that came after. She chose acting, leaving Harvard just 1 semester short of her degree. It was a bold decision, and one that would linger in the back of her mind, unfinished, waiting for its moment. But before any doubts could settle in, something extraordinary happened. In 1984, she stepped onto a film set in a way that would change her life forever, landing a role in The Karate Kid, one of the most iconic films of the decade. Directed by John G. Avildsen and starring Ralph Macchio as Daniel LaRusso, the story of an outsider trying to find his place struck a chord with audiences everywhere. And right there, at the heart of it, was Elisabeth, stepping into the spotlight at exactly the right moment, even if she didn't yet realize just how much her life was about to change. In The Karate Kid, Elisabeth Shue stepped into the role of Ollie Mills, the kind-hearted, confident cheerleader who saw something genuine in Daniel LaRusso long before anyone else did. It was her first major film role, and in many ways, it couldn't have been a more perfect beginning. The film didn't just succeed, it exploded into a cultural phenomenon, capturing the hearts of audiences across generations. Teenagers connected with its story of resilience, while adults found something timeless in its message. And at the center of it, Ollie Mills quickly became one of the most memorable female characters of the era. Warm, sincere, and refreshingly real. What makes it even more fascinating is that none of it was expected. Elisabeth herself later admitted that no one on set truly anticipated the kind of impact the film would have. Even the title, The Karate Kid, raised a few eyebrows at the time, something the cast would later laugh about in hindsight. But once the film reached audiences, none of those doubts mattered. It struck a nerve, became iconic, and almost overnight, Elisabeth Shue was no longer just a familiar face, she was a recognized name. And the momentum didn't stop there. That same year, she expanded her presence on television, taking on a regular role in the ABC series Call to Glory, where she portrayed the teenage daughter in a military family, proving that her rise wasn't a moment. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Although the ABC series Call to Glory only ran from 1984 to 1985, it gave Elisabeth Shue the chance to prove she wasn't limited to the big screen. She could hold her own on television as well. But the real shift came from the success of The Karate Kid. Almost overnight, doors began to open in ways she hadn't expected so early in her journey. Casting directors started paying attention. Scripts began to arrive. And for the first time, she was no longer seen as just a commercial actress hoping for a break. She was recognized as a serious presence in film. For someone who had been balancing college life, commercial work, and quiet ambition all at once, that kind of validation changes everything. She leaned into it. Determined to grow, she began working with an acting coach while continuing her studies at Harvard University. Standing still was never part of her nature. As she once reflected, there was something powerful about stepping into deeper emotions, about experiencing more than just the surface level of life, both on screen and off. As the late 1980s unfolded, she didn't rush her career. She built it carefully, one role at a time. In 1987, she took the lead in Adventures in Babysitting, a fast-paced comedy directed by Chris Columbus. Playing Chris Parker, a teenager whose simple babysitting job turns into a chaotic, unforgettable night across the streets of Chicago, Elisabeth showed a different side of herself, confident, witty, and fully capable of carrying a film on her own. It was another step forward, and a clear sign that her story in Hollywood was only just beginning. Her Adventures in Babysitting turned out to be more than just another role for Elisabeth Shue. It was a defining moment. The film was warm, funny, and effortlessly charming, and she carried it with a natural ease that made it unforgettable. Over time, it became one of those treasured pieces of 1980s cinema, the kind of movie people revisit years later, sharing it with a new generation while feeling that quiet pull of nostalgia. Just a year later, in 1988, she appeared alongside Tom Cruise in Cocktail, playing Jordan Mooney, the grounded, sincere counterpart to the film's fast-talking, ambitious bartender. The movie was a major box office success, even if critics were divided. Yet within all the flash and energy, Elisabeth's performance stood out in a quieter way. She brought warmth and authenticity to a role that could have easily faded into the background, giving the story an emotional center it might have otherwise lacked. Then came another unexpected turn. In 1989, she joined one of the biggest franchises of the time, stepping into the role of Jennifer Parker in the Back to the Future Part 2 and its sequel, taking over from Claudia Wells, who was unable to return due to a family illness. Acting opposite Michael J. Fox, she became part of an already beloved universe. The role itself didn't demand much. Jennifer spends a large portion of the film unconscious, but Elisabeth approached it with the same professionalism and care as any leading role. And behind that decision was something deeper, something personal, one of those quiet, human reasons that don't always make headlines, but shape the choices people make at the most pivotal moments of their lives. In the summer of 1988, Elisabeth Shue experienced a loss that would quietly reshape her life. Her older brother, William, just 26 years old and a medical student at Rutgers University Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, died in a tragic accident while the family was on vacation. A rope on a tire swing suddenly snapped, sending him into a tree. It happened in an instant, an unthinkable moment witnessed by her brother Andrew. The kind of loss that doesn't just pass, it lingers, changes everything. In the aftermath, grief became something she had to learn to live with. And it was during this time that she made a deeply personal decision, to take on the role of Jennifer Parker in the Back to the Future Part 2 and Back to the Future Part 3. It was a smaller, less demanding role, but that was exactly what she needed. It gave her the emotional space to step back, to process, to begin healing. Years later, she would honor her brother in a quiet but lasting way, naming her first son after William. Behind the scenes of a major Hollywood franchise, there was a very human story unfolding, one of loss, resilience, and finding a way forward. By the time the Back to the Future sequels wrapped, filmed back-to-back between 1989 and 1990, Elisabeth had already built a career many would have been satisfied with. But she wasn't finished. Beneath the success, there was a growing desire, something deeper than recognition, something more than simply being cast. It's easy to look back at her 1980s image and see the girl next door, and in many ways, she defined that role perfectly. But there was always another layer beneath that warmth, a quiet intensity, a sense of searching, that hadn't yet fully revealed itself, and would soon begin to shape the next chapter of her career. The early 1990s marked a quieter, more uncertain chapter for Elisabeth Shue, a period that felt less like a breakthrough and more like a slow turning point. She remained active, appearing in films like Soap Dish, 1991, The Marrying Man, 1991, 20 Bucks, 1992, and Heart and Souls, 1993. But unlike the momentum she had built in the late 1980s, these roles didn't quite resonate in the same way. She was still working, still present, but not yet being pushed to the limits of what she was truly capable of as an actress. At the same time, she found herself drawn back to something more grounded, the stage. In May 1990, she made her Broadway debut in Some Americans Abroad at Lincoln Center. A few years later, in 1993, she returned to Broadway in Birth and After Birth by Tina Howe. Theater offered her something Hollywood couldn't, a space to refine her craft away from the expectations of the box office and the pressure of public perception. It was quieter, more demanding, and deeply personal. Because the stage doesn't allow for second takes. It asks for presence, for honesty, for a kind of immediacy that can't be edited or polished later. Every performance exists only once, then disappears. And for someone like Elisabeth, who cared not just about success but about the work itself, that discipline was invaluable. It placed her among actors and creators who approached their craft with seriousness and conviction, people who weren't chasing attention, but truth. And in that environment, something was slowly taking shape, preparing her for the moment when her full potential would finally come into focus. Beneath the surface of those quieter years, something was building for Elisabeth Shue. She wasn't just taking roles, she was searching, carefully reading scripts, waiting for something that would truly challenge her. And in 1995, she found it. A project that would demand more than anything she had done before, and ultimately redefine how the world saw her. That project was Leaving Las Vegas. Directed by Mike Figgis and made on a modest budget, the film told a stark, unflinching story. Nicolas Cage starred as Ben Sanderson, a man determined to drink himself to death, while Elisabeth played Sarah, a Las Vegas prostitute who forms an unexpected, deeply human bond with him. If you want to understand the full range of her ability as an actress, this is the performance people point to. There was nothing polished or glamorous about Sarah. She lived on the edges, surviving day by day, holding on to fragments of connection where she could find them. It was the kind of role that demanded vulnerability, discomfort, and a willingness to step far beyond the image she had built in the 1980s. For an actress often seen as warm and approachable, this was a risk, a complete shift into something raw and exposed. And she didn't hold back. The production itself mirrored that intensity. Shot largely on 16mm film, the movie carried a grainy, almost documentary-like texture that made everything feel immediate and real. The budget was tight, the schedule unforgiving, and there was none of the usual Hollywood safety net. What carried the film instead was the connection between Nicolas Cage and Elisabeth Shue, two performances meeting in the middle of a story about people who, in their own ways, had stopped expecting to be saved, and yet somehow still found moments of truth in each other. The impact of leaving Las Vegas was immediate and undeniable. The film became a critical sensation, elevating everyone involved, but especially Elisabeth Shue. Nicolas Cage took home the Academy Award for Best Actor, while Elisabeth received widespread recognition of her own, earning nominations for the Academy Award for Best Actress, the BAFTA, the Golden Globe, and the Screen Actors Guild Award. She went on to win the Independent Spirit Award for Best Actress, along with honors from the Los Angeles Film Critics Association and the National Society of Film Critics. By any standard, it was a defining moment in her career. But what made it truly significant wasn't just the awards, it was what the performance revealed. She had taken a risk that many in her position might have avoided, stepping into a small, low-budget film with no guarantee of success. And in doing so, she proved something essential, not just to the industry, but to herself. She wasn't limited by image or expectation. She was capable of something deeper, something lasting. Interestingly, Elisabeth herself would later describe getting the role as a kind of luck. She understood how rare it was for an actress, especially one not yet considered a major dramatic star, to be offered a character with that level of emotional complexity. And when the opportunity came, she didn't hesitate. She gave everything to it. That choice changed everything. Because after the Oscars, after the recognition, the kinds of roles being offered to her began to shift. The industry saw her differently now, and a new phase of her career, defined by range and reinvention, was just beginning. In the years following leaving Las Vegas, the opportunities coming to Elisabeth Shue began to change in meaningful ways. The roles were more diverse, more layered, and allowed her to explore a wider emotional range. In 1996, she starred in The Trigger Effect, a tense thriller that explored how quickly ordinary lives can unravel when society begins to break down. Around the same time, she appeared in Deconstructing Harry, directed by Woody Allen, sharing the screen with a remarkable ensemble including Billy Crystal, Demi Moore, Robin Williams, and Stanley Tucci. In 1997, she moved into a completely different space with The Saint, a spy thriller opposite Val Kilmer. Playing Dr. Emma Russell, a brilliant and driven scientist, she showed she could carry herself just as confidently in a more commercial, action-oriented setting. The film's success reinforced her versatility. She wasn't confined to one type of role or genre. The late 1990s continued to broaden her range. In 1998, she appeared in Palmetto alongside Woody Harrelson, stepping into darker, more complex territory. That same year, she starred in Cousin Bet with Jessica Lange, further expanding her presence in period and character-driven stories. By 1999, she took on the lead role in Molly, portraying a young autistic woman under the care of her brother, played by Aaron Eckhart. It was a demanding and deeply emotional role. Then, in 2000, she appeared in Hollow Man, directed by Paul Verhoeven and co-starring Kevin Bacon, which became a major summer blockbuster. And as her career continued to evolve on screen, there was also something more personal unfolding behind the scenes, something that would soon become just as significant as any role she had taken on. And more than a decade after walking away just one semester short, Elisabeth Shue made a decision that had nothing to do with Hollywood, and everything to do with herself. In the spring of 2000, she returned to Harvard University, completed her remaining coursework, and on June 8, 2000, graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Government. She was 36 years old. It wasn't a public statement or a career strategy. It was something unfinished that she felt compelled to complete. That moment revealed something deeper about who she was. Not just an actress with an Academy Award nomination and a thriving career, but someone who honored her own commitments, even when no one else was paying attention. At 36, she already had everything many people spend a lifetime chasing: recognition, success, a growing family, and a respected place in the industry. There was no external pressure pushing her back to school. Nothing she needed to prove. And yet, she went back anyway. Because for her, it wasn't about image, it was about integrity. Finishing her degree wasn't a professional move, it was a personal one. It reflected a consistent thread running through her life, a refusal to leave important things incomplete, a belief that whatever truly matters deserves to be done fully and done right. The same quiet determination that shaped her career was there too. The instinct that turns effort into purpose, and purpose into something worth finishing. Family, marriage, and the film that came from the heart. In 1994, Elisabeth Shue married filmmaker Davis Guggenheim, a connection that began in an unexpectedly simple way, at a bowling party hosted by her Hollywood agency. Guggenheim would later go on to direct the Academy Award-winning documentary An Inconvenient Truth, building a career defined by thoughtful and impactful storytelling. Together, they built a life that balanced both creativity and privacy. They have 3 children, their son, Miles William, born in November 1997 and named in honor of her late brother William, their daughter Stella Street, born in March 2001, and their youngest daughter, Agnes Charles, born in July 2006. Despite their connections to Hollywood, the family has remained intentionally private, a quiet contrast to an industry that often thrives on visibility and attention. They eventually made their home in Wilmington, Delaware, where Elisabeth embraced a more grounded rhythm of life. Away from the spotlight, she has often spoken about her love for tennis, a sport she returns to whenever she can. In 2007, that sense of family and personal history came full circle in a deeply meaningful project, Gracie. The independent film tells the story of a young girl who loses her older brother in a soccer accident and fights to take his place on the boys' team, a narrative that closely echoed Elisabeth's own experience of loss and resilience. It wasn't just another role, it was something personal, something rooted in memory, and a way of honoring the past through storytelling. The story behind Gracie was not just inspired by real life, it was deeply personal. It drew directly from the experiences of Elisabeth Shue and her brother Andrew, shaped by the loss of their brother William, the grief that followed, and the way sports became a way to process something that had no simple explanation. The film itself became a true family collaboration. Davis Guggenheim directed, Elisabeth and Andrew both appeared on screen, and their brother John contributed as a co-producer. It wasn't just a project, it was something shared, something lived. While the film didn't reach a wide commercial audience, its significance went far beyond box office numbers. For Elisabeth, it was one of the most meaningful works she had ever been part of, a way of honoring memory through storytelling. And around this time, her career began to shift in a new direction. By the early 2000s, she stepped back from the relentless pace of Hollywood films and began exploring television, which had evolved into a space offering richer, more complex roles for actors seeking depth. In 2012, she took on a new chapter by joining the long-running CBS drama CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, as forensic specialist Julie Finley. It was a major commitment, and she remained with the series until its conclusion in 2015. Over those years, she became a central presence in a show that had already become a cultural institution. The role offered something different: stability, continuity, and the chance to develop a character over time. From a New Jersey girl doing Burger King commercials to an Oscar-nominated actress who keeps finding new ways to surprise us, she never chased fame for its own sake. And maybe that is exactly why she has lasted so long. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We'll see you in the next.